Bring back rock. Hey, it's Dean and welcome to Bring Back Rock. Today we're talking about the essential landmark records of the 80s. So I put my own personal panel of experts together and we tried to come up with the 10 essential records. First thing we found out, there was no way to limit it to 10, so we had to make some ground rules. First thing we did was we eliminated thrash. If you had Master Puppets, how could you not have Peace Cells? If you had Megadeth, how could you not have Anthrax? And Anthrax, not Slayer. So that we decided was a subgenre all its own that needs its own list. So we just eliminated thrash, and we decided to focus from 1982 to 1992, which means two of the records that really set the stage did not make the cut. Van Halen is considered really the template for what was to come in the 80s. So we would have had Van Halen 1 on there for sure. And AC/DC's Back in Black is one of the biggest selling records of all time. That also did not make the list. So from 82 to 92, these are the bands that either set up the genre early on with crossover success on radio and on MTV, and then the landmark albums to come that either kind of changed the direction rock was going or continued to have that success on MTV and on radio. That was really something special. So these ended up being our list of essential rock records from the 1980s. All right, let's talk about rock's essential albums from the 1980s. Basically 82 to 92. Not our favorites, not the best, but the essential ones for establishing and then maintaining rock's dominance throughout the decade. These are not in any particular order, semi-chronological. Here we go. Metal Health by Quiet Riot starts off the list. It came out in 1983 and sold 6 million copies. It's the first heavy metal album to go number 1 on the Billboard charts. It had a huge crossover hit in Come On, Feel the Noise. Next, we're going with Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister. It came out in 1984 and sold 3 million records, and the videos for I Wanna Rock and We're Not Gonna Take It were MTV mainstays. Out of the Cellar by Ratt came out also in 1984 and sold 3 million copies. The debut album spawned the single Round and Round, which was an MTV and radio and crossover hit. It established Ratt as a platinum and arena headlining band for the rest of the decade. In 1983, selling 4 million copies, was Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil, which really established them in the mainstream. They were the coolest, baddest band on the planet for the decade. In 1984, we also had the album 1984 by Van Halen. It sold 10 million records. It had the number 1 single Jump. It reached number 2 on the album charts. This album was the last one with David Lee Roth. I remember at the time it was a little controversial with all the keyboards, and David Lee Roth saying people want to hear Eddie Van Halen play guitar, not keyboards. This led to a more commercial time for the band. It was pretty keyboard-centric with Sammy Hagar on vocals. In 1986, we saw the release of Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi. It sold 12 million records and spent 8 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard record chart. It spawned the hits Wanted Dead or Alive, You Give Love a Bad Name, and Livin' on a Prayer. It's also the first album on this list that had the original cover band. Not really sure why, it didn't seem that risque to me, but they ended up pretty disappointed with the final album cover. They just sprayed down a black paper bag with water and wrote Slippery When Wet on it. I prefer the original cover, as does every red-blooded American boy out there. But what can you do? Next up, we have Whitesnake's 1987 self-titled album. The hits off this album included Still of the Night, Is This Love, Give Me All Your Love, and the number 1 hit, Here I Go Again. The album went to number 2 on the Billboard album charts and sold 8 million copies. The album proved so popular it led to a re-release of all of Whitesnake's other prior albums and it set their gold-selling Slide It In record from gold to double platinum. In 1987, we also saw the release of Def Leppard's Hysteria. Now, we did debate putting Pyromania on here, but once Pour Some Sugar hit, Def Leppard was unstoppable. The album went 12 times platinum and went to #1 on the record charts. It also spawned 7 singles and videos. One more thing, their sound changed from more of a rock, heavy metal sound to a more pop sound, probably due to the electronic drums, which I give them credit for sticking with Rick Allen after his accident, but it was probably the electronic drum machine that kind of drove the change in sound. 1987 saw the release of a third record on the list. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction started out kind of slow. Welcome to the Jungle was only a minor hit. I seemed to have this album forever before Sweet Child of Mine came out and blasted them to the top of the charts, giving them one of the biggest selling rock albums of all time and the biggest selling on this list with 18 million copies. It also went to #1. The album also gave rock a little bit of an attitude adjustment, bringing danger and attitude back to the forefront of the genre. Appetite for Destruction is the second album on the list that came out with a band cover to start with, before switching to their iconic skull cross logo they have now. In 1988, Poison released their debut album, Open Up and Say Ah, which spawned the #1 single, Every Rose Has Its Thorn. The album went to #2 and sold over 5 million records. It's the third album on the list that came out with an originally banned cover art. Once again, don't know why this one was banned. They didn't like the tongue sticking out of the girl's mouth, and so they just put black bars on the top and bottom. Whatever. And just interestingly enough, their next album also was banned. The Flesh and Blood Tattoo they felt was too bloody, so they had to clean it up. Next, I know we said one album per band, but Motley Crue's always been one for breaking the rules. Dr. Feelgood came out in 1989. It's Motley Crue's only #1 album and sold 6 million copies. It also spawned a string of hits from Dr. Feelgood to Same Old Situation to Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away, Without You, Kickstart My Heart. I remember living in Atlanta at the time and trying to get this the day it came out. I checked one record store twice, and then me and my buddy just ended up driving from record store to record store. Nobody had it the day it came out. It was very, very frustrating. Finally, about 9 o'clock, we found a record store just before they closed that had just put it out. I remember getting in his car and just cranking the hell out of that. It was awesome. Alright, one more thing about this album, and the reason it's really on the list is because of this. It was produced by Bob Rock, and it had a sound that made Metallica go, holy crap. This is exactly what we want our album to sound like. So Metallica went out and got Bob Rock to produce the last album on this list, their self-titled or Black album, which set Metallica up to be the band of the next decade, and still probably the biggest rock band on the planet. It was their first album that departed from their thrash sound to a more rock or metal sound, and got their first crossover success. With the single Enter Sandman, the album went to #1 and sold 16 million copies. One more band I wanted to mention here, which I couldn't pick an essential record for, is Aerosmith. They released Permanent Vacation and Pump back to back, selling 5 and 7 million copies respectively. It gave them a 1-2 punch in the 80s, much like Toys in the Attic and Rocks gave them a 1-2 punch in the 70s. They're also about the only band that survived grunge. Get a Grip, their next album, also sold 7 million copies, so about 20 million copies between those 3 records, and came out in '93 as grunge was hitting its peak. Also, they had their first #1 record ever in 1998 with Don't Wanna Miss a Thing. So Aerosmith did just fine in the 90s. Alright, so that wraps up our essential records of the 80s. I'm sure you have others. I have others. We tried to narrow it down to 10. I think we ended up with 11. It's not easy. Try it yourself. So many classic bands and classic albums that we had to leave off the list. So let's wrap it up there. All right, so that's what we came up for the essential 80s rock records. Let the debates begin, because we left a lot of classics of the genre on the cutting room floor. It was not easy, and we regret having to cut some really great records. Something else that just may have interested me was a lot of those records had covers that were originally banned. Here's one right behind me right now. So that, I don't know, I thought that was interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch. If you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, that would be great. And I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to watch the videos. So we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks again.